Live on tape, Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between. With award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. Here are your hosts, Tom and Charles.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress. My name is Tom Alexander, and of course, I'm joined by my partner, Charles Epstein. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tom. You know, we were talking earlier. I know after this, you got to head to Miami for a voiceover session. A lady you're rehearsing with your band, and tomorrow you're coming up my way to do some studio work. I think you said you're laying down a piano track for a song someone you know is producing. You know, with all these things that you do, and this is not an atypical week, I have to say. Let me ask you, how many hours would you say roughly do you put in on a given week? Just ballpark.
Gee, well, let's see. Well, I get the music, the voiceovers, and writing. I don't know, 65, 70 hours.
Really?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Now, what would you say if I told you you're lying?
You filthy, rotten, yellow son of a...
Lying?
Well, look, I've never known you to be untruthful. To say that you work 60 hours is delusional, and I have the authority to back it up. This isn't just me talking.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm all ears.
Okay, well, check this out. I'm sorry this comes as such a shock. Well,
Yeah.
Check this out. A Bureau Labor Statistics study came out, I think, in, what does it say here, 2011, confirms that anyone who claims to be working more than 60 hours a week is not telling the truth. The study found respondents give an estimate of typical working time that is 5 to 10% higher than what shows up in their diaries. But the largest overestimates came from the people providing the highest estimates. People who said they typically work 75 or more hours per week tended to provide diaries reflecting 25 hours less work per week than they estimated. People claiming to typically work between 65 and 74 hours, this means you, weekly, tended to be overestimating by 18 hours. Which begs the question, what exactly were you doing with those 18 hours?
Well, look, all right, okay, fair enough. I got to say that's actually a bit of a comfort. If I'm not working all the hours I thought I was working, maybe I'm not being as criminally underpaid as I think.
Good thinking. Very possibly. I think the analogy is sort of we open a bag of chips. Turns out 33% of it is air. So if 60% of our body weight is made up of water and 25% of our lives is made up of air, we're basically 85% water and air. I guess the remaining 15% is wishful thinking and self-delusion. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, 85% water and air, or in my case, pasta, I think would be more.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why we would tend. I mean, I suppose there are some obvious reasons why we'd overestimate the hours we put in, but maybe also it's part, particularly if the kind of work you do, you carry it around in your head. There's really no line between work and whatever is, not work.
Well, no, you know what? That's an excellent point, because I should bring this up. I'm a radio guy, right? So I've been in radio for years and years, and do a lot of offshoots of radio with voiceovers and things like that. But at a time when I was at CBS and I was doing a nationally syndicated sports show, the sort of the lead dog on that show always claimed to be working. No matter what he was doing, he was working. I'd call him up at night. We'd be long after we'd gone home. Everybody'd gone home. Call him up. Hey, what are you up to? I'm working. What do you mean? What do you mean you're working? And he said, "No, I'm working. What are you doing? You have another job that I don't know about?" No. I'm working for the show. I said, "Well, give me an example. What exactly are you?" "Well, I'm watching the game. I got the game on."
Of course.
How is that working? Well, something might happen in the game that I might have to share on the show sometime.
Oh.
And I said, you equate that with work. Well, yeah. Everything is open on the show. So whatever happens in our lives is fodder for the show. So I thought to myself, well, geez, that's pretty darn nice. That's really piling on the hours.
Yeah, well, I hope he has a very creative accountant. I'll say that. And it must be pretty nice to be able to write off the Domino's and all those beer runs. So hey,
I'm telling you, man, you could really write off. That's just that's tax happiness waiting to happen. I'm telling you,
no doubt. On my end, my wife, who doesn't always recognize the line between my work and whatever is non-work. I mean, for instance, occasionally she'll see me in my office yucking it up with a business associate, and she thinks I'm just, it's a grand old time, and I'm just yucking it up. I mean, she doesn't appreciate the work. She doesn't appreciate, the time I spent the previous night in the bathtub working up the ad libs. I mean, that's work.
Yeah, that's work.
It looks like it's not, and I'm just sitting there staring off into space. Actually, also, when I stare off into space. And
that's also work.
It could very well be. She's trying to tell me something that's very, very important. But again, that just sometimes coincides with a thought that's starting to form, something I've been struggling with, and all of a sudden, voila, and there she is, and I'm just like, hey, look, obviously I do my best work when my wife is haranguing me.
You harangue? Well, there you go. It's something we need to think about and consider for exactly what it is we're doing. Is it what is work? What is not work? We do have a little bit of work that we're doing here, which is a fun podcast ahead. That's for sure. Our guests, Charles, include the founder of Learn to Live. It is Dale Cook, and he'll be joining us from Minneapolis. And also, we got to go way across the pond over to Athens, Greece for our second guest, and that is Steven Bernstein, who has spearheaded the program to bring filmmaking back to the cradle of Western civilization in Greece. For a long time, of course, the film industry was struggling there, and now with the tax incentives that Steven helped create and build, all of a sudden, Greece is ripe for a lot of filming and television production, and it's going to be very exciting talking with him.
Yeah, no doubt. And I tell you, from Minneapolis, South Florida, all the way out to Athens, I feel that we should get frequent flyer points for this.
That would be nice, or at least a trip to the Greek islands. One or the other.
At least.
Yeah.
I'll take a souvlaki.
We will be back in just a moment. You're listening to Work in Progress.
Employee sleep impacts company health. Poor sleep directly impacts absenteeism, performance, safety, and healthcare costs. It worsens other chronic diseases such as diabetes, stroke, and heart disease. The Drowsel Sleep Health Program educates, motivates, and measures progress towards better sleep health. Learn more about how we can help to improve your employees' sleep health today. Visit resonea.com. That's RESONEA.com.
Joining us today is Dale Cook, CEO and co-founder of Learn to Live. Learn to Live's mission is to empower millions of people to actively improve their mental fitness via online assessments, live coaching, and other resources that address challenges with stress, anxiety, depression, social anxiety, and insomnia. Thanks for joining us, Dale. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
It's great to have you, and please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hey, Dale.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. Are you calling in from Minneapolis?
Snowy Minneapolis, snowy in April, as they say.
Well, isn't that a Prince song?
Sure is, and it's been making the rounds on the internet and on all of our mobile phones the last 24 hours. It's how we cope.
Since we knew you were coming on, I've been eager to get your position on the burning question of the day. As of all the people we've had on thus far, I think it's fair to say that you're probably the closest to an authority on the subject. Dale, tell our audience, what is the definition of Minnesota nice?
With that buildup, I had a feeling that I wasn't quite sure where this was going. I think there's really two. One definition of Minnesota nice is that we're all sort of genteel folk here up in the upper Midwest, and that we don't engage in too much conflict, and we kind of keep things on the peaceful side of the house. The other definition of Minnesota nice, which is a little less popular, is that in true sort of Nordic fashion, someone may be really polite to you, even though maybe they're not feeling so great about their relationship to you, but they're still nice to you and don't really kind of address the other parts of that. So, but I think the real Minnesota nice is that generally people are really happy to meet Minnesotans, and that we're pretty even keeled on whole.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, to the second definition, some people who are not maybe feeling particularly generous or just being honest say there's an element of passive aggressiveness to it. You know, Tom and I come from the Northeast. Tom is from Philly area. I'm from New York. So I guess one way to sort of mark the difference is I think Minnesota nice doesn't leave fingerprints. New York nice leaves fingerprints, and you're just happy it wasn't brass knuckles. You're just happy it wasn't brass knuckles.
I lived in Boston for a year, and so experienced maybe some hybrid of those. Kind of maybe we'll call it Boston nice, and I would agree with you on a little bit of the fingerprints, but we loved it there. Just loved it.
That's funny. Dale, I see that you, among your impressive academic achievements, was being in the concert choir when you were an undergrad at the University of Minnesota. Are you still active? Do you sing with a choir group?
Well, I got to tell you, I don't know who from our team is giving you all this research, but I'm going to have to talk to them about that. I don't currently sing with a group. I think if you call singing at the top of my lungs with my 11-year-old, with guitars in our hand, pretending that we're Prince singing about April snow, then yes, I do. But no, I don't formally sing with any groups at the moment, and maybe most people are happy about that. I don't know, but sadly, I don't do that, and I certainly love doing that.
By the way, just so we keep your staff out of trouble, this was actually a product of our crack research staff, which basically entailed going to your LinkedIn page and finding all kinds of offbeat pieces of information.
Well, there you go. Terrific.
Yes.
So all complaints go to LinkedIn.
That's right. I need to check clearly I need to update my profile in some way. So I'll get right on that. Yeah.
Dale, you started Learn to Live 7 years ago,
right.
I believe.
Yeah, pretty close to that. About 6. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How did you come to see there was a need to provide people with tools to improve their mental fitness? Was there something you saw in the market? Was there an aha moment?
I think there were two things. One is, my co-founder, Dr. Russ Morfitt, it really started with his concern as a clinician. And so he had been he's 20 years working with patients in private practice, and he saw firsthand that, many clients either had to deal with extensive wait times or had to travel a long way, or that in fact, and you may know the statistic already, that 3 out of 4 people who suffer from a mental health problem will not seek out face-to-face therapy. Social stigma is still the first problem, biggest barrier. Access is number 2, cost is number 3. So the way I got involved was really when Dr. Russ approached me and said, listen, there's 20 years of great research showing that clinically speaking, this can be done very effectively online for certain conditions, but I'm not a business guy. You're in business school, Dale. Can you help me think through how to scale this thing out? And then the aha moment for me was all the way back to undergrad. I was very involved in school, pre-med, doing all kinds of things, athletics. And I started to get pretty anxious and had some trouble sleeping. And I was one of the few who's had the good fortune of meeting with a therapist for a couple of sessions, and he talked to me about cognitive behavioral therapy. And for me, it was a couple sessions, the light came on, and it was an aha moment for me that, wow, this stuff is really practical, it works. And boom, took care of my concern. And so years later, when Russ approached me, he really didn't have to try very hard to convince me that this was something that was worthwhile.
It's interesting. Tom and I actually have college age kids. And, we know firsthand, we know from stories that they've shared with us that a lot of these kids have a lot of anxiety. Have you guys made a lot of inroads on campuses?
We have, here in Minnesota, there's groups like the University of Minnesota, which is, I think, the second largest academic institution in the country. So we serve 56,000 students across 5 campuses. We're in our second year. We've seen a tremendous amount of students use our assessment and our programs. I think 7,000 maybe in year one. So speaks to, I think, the need and also the fit. I think our, these digital or internet natives, as we call them, looking for, potential help and solutions from their phones is a powerful thing. And that's one example. We actually serve a good number of colleges and universities now. And we do find that I think the way we do the programs and the way we sort of reach out to what we call these silent sufferers, especially students on campus, I think we're a fit, fortunately. And it's, a double-edged sword. To see really high utilization is exciting for us because that means we're helping people, but it also is a reminder that there's a lot of students out there that need help.
Dale, curious, this is kind of maybe a little bit of a 2-part question here. I know being in Minnesota, weather is a thing. And I've always heard that weather really does affect people's moods and, can have effect on depression. Do you see that with long winters and those kinds of things?
I think to be safe, I should say officially on air that I should defer to Dr. Russ for the epidemiology of that. But I can certainly say that there is correlation. There's things called seasonal affect disorder. There's certainly swings in anxiety or depression problems during the winter months. Natural light can have a big impact on that. And in these long winter months, there's certainly a light issue. Among other things. And so we do see swings with that. And, that's not just in Minnesota, but certainly is real here for us.
Yeah. And then social anxiety. We've been hearing a lot about that lately. Has there been a spike in social anxiety? If so, what's behind it?
That's a very good question. The usage of our social anxiety program is still relatively constant, even compared to 4 years ago when we launched that particular program. So we haven't seen a particular spike that would be a result of any more, recent trends. Certainly, I think as people, I was talking with someone recently about what is this, the best life forward concept, that's portrayed on Instagram, and these people that have kind of these perfect lives and some of the anxiety that goes around with that. That's actually something we're seeing much more of sort of in high school and university age students that are still trying to determine who they are and who they're going to follow and who they're going to look up to. And one of the anxiety issues that comes out of that is social anxiety. So if there's a question about are there trends and are there causes, I would say that's certainly one of them.
Before I ask a final question, I just have to tell you, I really, really like the name, Learn to Live. It reminds me of my daughter. When she was an infant, people would refer to me to this book or that manual or that tape. But as an engineer friend, used to love telling me, contrary to what you've been taught, the empirical method is flying by the seat of your pants. So,
right.
Yeah. And you need to learn through experience how to do it. And as the name of your company implies, life is a learned experience requiring, coaching and, experience. Yes, I really like the name. But, the question is, again, I saw on your LinkedIn page, it says you're well-versed in building things from the ground up.
Here we go.
I'm getting a sense that you did not write your LinkedIn page. You're going to have to get your hands on whoever's responsible for your LinkedIn page.
Well, I think it's, to be fair to whoever those people are, it's all true. It's just, this is a Minnesota thing, right? Where someone says something nice about you, it's really hard to respond to that.
Oh,
yeah,
I
so that's
see.
part of it
I
too.
see. So
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. But I guess the question is, to a young entrepreneur out there, or to somebody who's got the bug, what is the number one thing you know now that you wished you knew, 7 years ago, to pick a random number?
Wow. I think the biggest thing I would say is that it's really rewarding, but it's hard. The success comes when you stick with it. It's really a matter of staying incredibly determined and incredibly focused. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of ups and downs, kind of here to zero, same day. I can attest to that. But what I would tell my younger self or any others thinking about this is it's really, really hard. You have to dig deep and lean into it in a pretty big way for a meaningful period of time, but it'll work. Execution is a big part. Probably I would say the biggest part of it is sticking to it, being resilient, not to use too many mental health terms here, but resilience is a tough thing to do. It's a tough skill to master, but I would argue it's pretty key to making something happen.
Very interesting. And we really do appreciate your time. Lots of interesting things to talk about, and hopefully we can have you join us again sometime in the near future. Our guest has been Dale Cook. He's the CEO and co-founder of Learn to Live, and they empower millions of people to actively improve their mental fitness via online assessments. Thank you so much, Dale. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Charles. Really appreciate it.
And we'll be back right after these words.
As the demand for ever more talent increases, the issues of equity become top-level concerns for organizations. Comp teams are creating new playbooks to meet the challenge. For a growing number of organizations, those playbooks include job-based ranges that historically have been too burdensome to implement and maintain. Learn the trends driving adoption and how you can leverage them to attract and retain critical talent in PayScale's latest research. Visit us at payscale.com. That's payscale.com.
We appreciate you coming on. Please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hi, Charles. Welcome. And you should be welcoming me. I should be welcoming you. But it's great to be on from Greece.
Yeah, thanks for spending some time with us today, Stephen. We really do appreciate it. I have to say, with all due respect, Steve, Tom, there's something wrong with this picture. Tom Alexander, whose name was anglicized at Ellis Island from the far more euphonious Alexopoulos. It's so euphonious, I probably mispronounced that. How did I do with that, Tom?
Oh, you did okay. I'll give you a B. It's Alexopoulos.
Alexopoulos. The far more euphonious Alexopoulos is here in South Florida, land of impatient elderly Jews who will return a bowl of chicken soup if it's 2 degrees off. While Steve Bernstein has been ensconced in the seat of Hellenistic culture for several years. Yes. How did this come to be, Stephen?
Well, Greece was a place that I'd come to often as a child, as an adolescent, as a young man. Lawrence Terrell said it's a place you come to discover yourself. And I have always found it a place of inspiration. And now that I spend most of my time writing, as well as occasionally directing, it is a great place to commune with the muse and discover those parts of yourself and the intellect and your sensibility that you wouldn't access in a busier place. It stimulates and it informs, and it is genuinely a magical and beautiful place.
Was it that love affair with the country, the beauty, the history, the people, or did you see a huge need that had to be addressed that sort of lured you there to really spearhead this program, this 25% cash rebate for film production?
No, it wasn't that, and it wasn't like I was going out looking for business, because this isn't my primary business. I was a writer. I still am, of course. I'm a director. I was a cinematographer for a long time. Shot films like the Oscar-winning Monster and so on. So it wasn't a place that you would typically think I would come to look for new business. but I was here writing a script. I was in Mykonos, and we were having lunch with a group of people, and I was, I guess for want of a better term, pontificating about my views about tax incentives generally and stimulating film production in regions outside of Los Angeles more generally. So when they see a tax incentive in a place like Greece, then they can say, well, if we get 25% of our local spend back, it doesn't have to be repaid. It simply comes off really our eventual profit threshold, and it gives us a greater chance in the marketplace to have success. And I would say one other thing, by the way, which is important. It's not 25% in Greece anymore. It's now 35%, which makes it among the most competitive tax incentives anywhere in the world. When you combine that, if I can just tout the place for a minute, with the unimaginable beauty that is Greece, with some very good, really A-list crews here, with fantastic weather, and of course, historic locations to use as a backdrop, it should be a very attractive place to bring a film. And of course, actors are lifeblood of movies, and where they want to work matters. And with no disrespect to any other location, if you say to an actor, would you rather work in some industrial community somewhere in the northeast of America in the middle of winter, by the way, from which I sprung, I'm from Buffalo, or would you rather work by the azure blue bathwater warm sea in Greece? I think often they would opt for the latter. So for all those reasons, it's, I think, very attractive to filmmakers. And to go back, when I was telling them my views, I didn't realize that some of them had a connection with members of the Greek government, particularly the South Aegean region. And so they said, hey, would I mind coming and speaking to them at their offices in Syros, which is very close to Mykonos. I went, I spoke to them. Again, I told them what I would do if I was put in charge of Greece and Greece film production. And they said, well, could I write something up for them? I went back to Los Angeles. I sent them, as we do, a 10-page, 15-page document. Amazingly, about a month later, I got a phone call, not from them, but from a journalist in Athens, thanking me for my, I guess it was a $85 million investment that I intended to make in Greece. So somehow the story had gotten changed, and I was going to be making this substantive investment. I dissuaded her of this view and explained that no, that wasn't my vision. My vision was to attract that sort of money rather than provide it myself. And then I went into the details of what I would do. Make a long story short, the government invited me back. I came back to Greece. We had a series of meetings. We located a great place for a studio. We developed the idea of how the tax incentive might be structured. It was presented to the Greek parliament. Amazingly, the two sides, the two parties, current ruling party and the New Democracy, agreed, and it passed. And then in February of last year, it became law, and money was provided to attract international production here. Also that year, last year, I ran our first film training program, which was an intense series of seminars over a week. We were vastly oversubscribed because we are very much part of the culture here and we support it. We provided that education to all Greeks free of charge, and it was much appreciated. A 15-minute standing ovation at the end of the program, and a demand for us to bring it back, which we now are.
Really, really interesting. By the way, as a quick aside, I've always wanted to read Lawrence Durrell, so I'm going to have to jump that up in my queue. So thank you.
You must.
Yes. I assume one of the lures of filming in Greece is being able to shoot on iconic ancient sites. I'm assuming there's some degree of red tape. Is that so? Is that a problematic thing for a filmmaker to do?
The thing about Greece is that they are cognizant of their important history. You call them the cradle of civilization. They are. I mean, art began here, philosophy, really everything that we now cherish culturally can be traced in its genesis to ancient Greece. And the Greek people, I think, feel it's incumbent on them to protect that heritage, at least their architectural heritage, those things which have survived. In saying that, they're also very aware, having lived with these monuments, what they can tolerate and what they can't tolerate. So they are more than willing to work with filmmakers on making sure that these places are both protected but can be successfully utilized. It's not to say that when we first began this, there weren't teething problems. When crews came and said, hey, we'll just shoot on this 4,000-year-old site, and we'll be putting up lights and doing rigging. And naturally, those not familiar with filmmaking, or even those who are familiar with filmmaking, were a little bit horrified. But measures have been taken to make sure these places are protected and that the filmmakers are facilitated. And now most sites are now available in Greece to shoot. And there are some remarkable sites here, and not just the ancient buildings. Some of the geography, Meteor and so on, are just spectacular. And until you look at places like northern Greece, which are less visited, you'd be amazed at what's available. There's the greatest concentration of microclimates of anywhere in the world. So from mountains to lakes to forests to deserts to sea, it's all available in Greece.
We talk about Greece as the cradle of civilization, as you say, also the cradle of drama and comedy. I think it would be kind of an interesting thing if we got somebody like Quentin Tarantino to do an update of, some Sophocles or Lysistrata or something like that. I think that would be kind of hilarious. There are some gangster elements in some of those Greek dramas, don't you think? I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, look, I'm a fan of Quentin. Naturally, it's an interesting concept. I don't know if something he would go for, but certainly we should think about. But there's 10,000 stories that could be done here, and so much of significance happened here. You got to realize that the Ottoman Empire for a long while ruled much of what we now know as Greece. So the clash of these two cultures is something we still see to some degree today. It's one of the things that informs all of our politics. And it all happened here in Greece. The history of Greece during the Second World War is a tragic and remarkable one. There's many things of great interest here, and it's a little bit underutilized, considering what it offers to filmmakers in both its history and its environment.
Yeah, just a quick aside. Years ago, the great Finnish filmmaker Aki Kaurismäki did a modern update of a Hamlet called Hamlet Goes Business. Maybe we can get Quentin to do Oedipus Goes Gangster. Aside from that, actually a serious question. So, putting auteur theory aside for a moment, filmmaking is an inherently collaborative endeavor. When crews from the States or elsewhere come to film in Greece and enlist Greek nationals as part of the production team, are there any cultural differences or issues that need to be overcome or reconciled?
It's a great question. And yes, there are many. The working methodology in America and the working methodology in Greece are different. I would say, by the way, I lived in the UK for over 20 years, and I can tell you that the working methodologies in the UK and the US are very different. Even the nomenclature and to the way we identify different crew members and what their specific functions are different in each community that we go to. Greece has a creative foundation, principally in very small films here, and so crews tend to share jobs and functions. And there are great filmmakers working in Greece, and I would argue that some of the best directors now working in the world are in fact Greek in origin. So whereas there are some differences, they're not difficult to overcome once a crew gets here. I would not suggest to any American crew they come here and hire an all Greek crew, and that was never our plan. I think what is more typical, what we used to do in Canada when we first used to go to Vancouver or any other location I've gone to outside the United States, we bring along certain keys, and then we integrate with some local talented artists and artisans. And there's a balance that one strikes so that you can make best use of local knowledge, at the same time use those methods that are typical of what you did in your home country, and in this case, particularly the United States.
We're speaking with Steven Bernstein. He's an American filmmaker, a writer, a director, producer, and has helped launch the great cash rebate to lure film production back to Greece, which is now up to, as he informed us, 35%, which is just incredible. Stephen, as a Greek American with a lot of family still in Athens and Argos, I'm no stranger to the culture, to the language. Many of our listeners with large global companies with expat workforces transitioning to any new country and culture can be tough. How has the transition been for you, especially learning the language, which I can say, is an exceptionally challenging one to learn? And also, are there any general lessons vis-a-vis the expat experience that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, lakala. Look, it's a great question. Carolyn, my partner, talented artist in her own right, and a producer of my last film and so on. She and I came on this journey together, and parts of it have been dreamlike and otherworldly and perfect. People here really have a different understanding of the nature of the world than we as Americans do. And I would say, if I can be pejorative, dangerously pejorative, possibly a better understanding of the world. Certainly it's informed by the complexities of living in Europe, and Europe is a very complex place with many cultures interacting and clashing. But also it's born of an understanding of thousands of years of shared history, and also in Greece, a sense of extended family. And you'll find with the Greeks, and I don't say this to sell the place, but simply because it's true, they are, I think, the kindest people that I've ever lived amongst. That said, it doesn't have the infrastructure of Florida, where you guys are, of New York, or Los Angeles. Not everything works all the time, and the priority isn't always on efficiency rather than on decency. And with an emphasis on decency rather than efficiency, it means you're not always efficient, but you're always decent.
Really interesting. And by the way, we've had guests on before who've been pejorative, but you're the first who's been dangerously pejorative. So thank you for that, Steven. Yeah.
I've been looking for a name to my memoir when I write it. I think dangerously pejorative. I think so. Is fantastic.
From the sublime to the ridiculous. I have to share this with you because this is probably the only interview I'm going to have a chance to share this. Now, I know there have been many, a veritable plethora of Greek American legends of screen, stage, every walk of American life. By the way, Tom, is plethora a Greek word like agora?
It is. Plethora is a Greek word. It means full or fuller.
All right. So excellent. So
filled
I
up.
accidentally stumbled on a Greek word in this interview. That's happy coincidence. Anyway, to me, the absolute peak of iconhood was achieved, in my estimation, by none other than Telly Savalas. Let me just explain real briefly. Some years ago, we were trying to get a friend of mine. We were going to dinner. I don't know what we were, but he refused. Why? Because they're in the midst of a 24-hour Kojak marathon. So Andy, tape it. You'll listen later. You'll watch later. I can't. I have to watch it live. He had to watch the Telly Savalas 24-hour marathon live, or it just would not have the same level of excitement.
I can't even comment without being dangerously pejorative on that. But I would point out that in addition to the estimable Telly Savalas, Christopher Scores, who founded 20th Century Fox, Ted Sarandos, who's the head of Netflix, Jim Giannopoulos, who's the head of Paramount, all Greek Americans. So the Greek contribution to the American culture and our contemporary zeitgeist is a profound one. So one that I think naturally would suggest that now the United States should return the favor and help Greece, rise out of its crisis.
That's wonderful. Steven Bernstein is an American filmmaker and producer, writer, director, and of course, a major figure in luring film production back to Greece with just an enormous cash rebate for filmmakers and film production people around the world. Steven, we really appreciate your time in joining us today from your home on the idyllic, beautiful island of Corfu. And we really, really appreciate it. And hopefully sooner than later, we'll get a chance to come over and say hello in person.
Look, I think everybody should, come to Greece. If not to work, then at least for a holiday, just so people can access me, we have an Instagram page called Steven Bernstein, Director Writer, and I write about Greece there all the time. Well, that's the place to go, Steve Bernstein, Director Writer.
This is Work in Progress. There's more in a moment.
Sparky the Fire Dog here. Protect your family from fire. Make sure your home has smoke alarms in every bedroom, outside your sleeping areas, and on every level of your home, even your basement. For games and activities, go to sparky.org.
We want to keep you, your family, and your community safer from fire. This message brought to you by the National Fire Protection Association and your local fire department. Visit sparky.org.
Wrapping up on Work in Progress, I'm Tom Alexander, along with Charles Epstein. A lot of fun today.
Oh, yes. Great guest. I thought it was a terrific show. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm bragging, but then again, there's something to be said for being too self-deprecating. People are usually only too eager to believe your low opinion of yourself.
No, I hear that. No, I tend to, whenever I meet someone for the first time, generally say, I'm sorry. I figured I just get the inevitable out of the way. And eventually I'm going to have to apologize to them.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
But speaking of the opposite of self-deprecating, I'd like to pat ourselves on the back for selecting the perfect song to play Dale on with. Prince's The Ballad of Dorothy Parker. We were thinking of going with Sometimes It Snows in April based on the dusting of snow Dale mentioned they got in Minneapolis when we spoke, but it's just too maudlin.
Yeah, depressing our listeners is not part of the business plan.
Oh, no, definitely not. Also, we were talking shortly after we got off with Dale how some of our best exchanges happen off mic, either before we record or just after. And he mentioned to us how he regularly meets with a group of fellow CEOs, as who knows better than a fellow CEO what you've been through, taking out a second mortgage, sweating payroll, staring into the abyss while keeping the team motivated and on task. I thought that was fascinating.
Very interesting. I never thought of that, but it makes sense. And great conversation with Steve, an American in Corfu. How cool is that?
Yes, very. I was thinking, he's not the first expat filmmaker, as you know. It's a pretty impressive lineup.
Yeah. There were several actually who had to move abroad because of the McCarthy blacklist. It reminds me of the motion picture The Front, if you remember that one.
Oh, sure, of course.
And of course, Jules Dassin would be a good example, the director, producer, writer, who moved to France to revive his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph Losey, who directed The Go-Between and several movies scripted by the great Harold Pinter. And of course, there's one of your favorites.
Oh, well, who else, right? Stanley Kubrick,
yes.
who was based in London since the 60s, mid-60s, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So as I was listening to Steve talking about the 2 or 3 years he's been in Greece, I was thinking what it takes for an expat to adjust to the local culture. There were so many nuances. You could prepare and have a roadmap. In fact, it's essential, but there's nothing like living it and being immersed in it day to day to know how things really work.
Yeah. Every time I'd gone to Greece with my family, we just never approached it as being tourists. We just immersed ourselves into the culture. It helps, of course, when you speak the language and you actually have Greek background, but we just felt that's the true way to experience any other country when in Rome, right?
Absolutely.
We are done for this show, and I guess it would probably be appropriate to sign off with this one in Greek, Charles.
Oh, go, have at it.
All right, so I would say "Ευχαριστώ που με άκουσες, addio," which means thank you for listening and so long. He's Charles Epstein. I'm Tom Alexander. This is Work in Progress, and we'll see you next time. So long, everybody.
This has been Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between, with award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. For more, visit worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. That's worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. Join us next week for another edition of Work in Progress.